What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. Welcome to day 127 of the 365-day graphic novel review challenge. Today, I want to talk to you about Ant-Man Season 1 by Tom DeFalco and Horacio Dominguez. This is an origin story for Henry Pym, the first Ant-Man, and it is part of a line of Season 1 graphic novels that Marvel did a few years ago, and this is basically taking Ant-Man's origin and kind of representing it for a modern day. And first of all, I want to go ahead and talk about the artwork so I don't forget about that. I really love Horacio Dominguez's artwork. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but his style is very cartoony, but it doesn't go over the edge. And I like cartoony styles quite often. There are plenty of artists who do that cartoony style, and I love their work, but some people, they don't like it when that cartoony style goes over the top, and sometimes I would put myself in that category as well, but Dominguez, he manages to hit that cartoony style without going over the top. This is kind of like what you can expect in this book, and I really love this style. This is how it is throughout the entire book. His style does not ever diminish at any point in this book, and I really like what he was doing here with the artwork here, and I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye out for this artist on other books in the future. And I also really like the writing from Tom DeFalco. I am not a big fan of a lot of his work. You look at the stuff that he was writing in the 1990s, and to me, it felt like he was trying to bring back that style of Marvel Comics from the 1960s, which I love a lot of the Marvel Comics from the 60s, but when you're trying to bring that back in the 1990s, it feels weird and forced, and it just doesn't work. Tom DeFalco, in a lot of ways, kind of felt like Stan Lee light in the 1990s, and I wasn't a huge fan of that. This does not feel like that at all. This is going to sound like a little bit of a backhanded insult, but this did not feel like it was written by Tom DeFalco, and I think it's really good. It doesn't feel like he's trying to bring back that whole Stan Lee thing that he was working with in the 90s and even early 2000s. This feels like an entirely different writer, and I really like what he's doing here. I like what he's doing with all the characters. Most of them feel very fleshed out. Even the villain, he doesn't feel like a 100% evil, mustache-twirling bad guy. He's doing some really bad stuff, but he's also got a little bit of a sympathetic backstory there, and I really like what he's doing with all these characters. Now, I don't know how canon this book is with the Marvel Universe, and that was kind of an ongoing thing with all of the Season 1 books that I've read, where some of them felt like they could fit around the Marvel Universe like a glove, and then some of them, while they might have been good stories, they definitely did not fit in the Marvel Universe. For example, Doctor Strange Season 1, it felt like it could have happened immediately after Strange Tales 115, and it didn't feel like it was really contradicting any of the other Doctor Strange stories from the 1960s. But then Fantastic Four Season 1, while it was a really good story, it did not fit in the Marvel Universe of the 1960s or any other decade. It completely felt like it was an alternate reality story, and while I like that story, it did not fit in the Marvel Universe. This is kind of sort of like that. I have not read a whole lot of Ant-Man comics from the 60s. I've actually only read both of his origin stories from the 60s. The first one was called The Man in the Anthill, and it wasn't even a superhero story. It was more of a horror story like you would see in the 50s. And then the next one had him actually putting on the helmet and the costume, and he was fighting like communist spies or something like that. This kind of ignores both of those, and it kind of sort of goes with the gimmick of what happened in The Man from the Anthill, or The Man in the Anthill. It kind of goes with that premise. It has him being shrunk down, and then he's in an anthill and he's running from ants, but it's not the same way that it happened in Henry Pym's debut issue. He's actually shrunk against his will here, and then he's running from a spider, and he's running from these guys who are trying to kill him, whereas in The Man from the Anthill, he basically shrunk himself voluntarily, and then he was just testing out his serum. So this does kind of ignore his two origin stories that happened in the 1960s, but since I haven't read a whole lot of Ant-Man, that doesn't really bother me. I think that this is actually a superior origin story to what we had in the 60s, and that's something that I wouldn't often say, because I think that most of the origin stories from the 60s don't need to be tampered with, but in this case, I think that what they did here really works. I really like the story, I really like the characters, I really like the artwork. There's only one thing about this book that I did not really care for, and that is every single page, it seems like they are trying to hit us over the head with the fact that Henry Pym is a flawed character. And if you've been reading comics for any length of time, you probably already know that in the 1970s, he accidentally assaulted his wife Janet, and then that became his single defining character trait ever since then, which is weird and a little bit hypocritical because Peter Parker once assaulted Mary Jane in the 1990s, and nobody has said anything about that since then. But for some reason, whenever Henry Pym accidentally backhands Janet Van Dyne, and if you read the issue, it's very clear that it was accidental. Whenever that happens, that becomes like the one thing that nobody will ever let go. And they're trying to build up to that. They're trying to explain how Henry is a very flawed individual, how he has a lot of psychological problems in his life. And they're trying to, I guess, seed that whole idea of him being paranoid and having other psychological problems. They're trying to build up to that here, and it just feels forced. It seems like on every single page, Henry is talking about how he's paranoid and how just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. And when you're paranoid, you always plan for betrayal. And he keeps talking about how he's paranoid, and I get it. You can tell me that 3 or 4 times. You don't have to tell me on every single page. That was really my only problem with this book, was that it felt like it was going way over the top, trying to convince me that this is a guy with some psychological issues. And I'm not even sure if that's 100% clear in this book. It feels like Henry Pym is telling us that he's paranoid, but I'm not actually sure if he is an actual diagnosed case of having paranoia. I don't really know if that's true, or if this is just the character thinking that he has paranoia. So it's really weird. I think they could have toned that down like 80% and it would have been fine. But other than that, I really enjoyed this book. I actually think this would have made a really good Ant-Man movie if they didn't make the one that they did. And I like the Ant-Man movie that we got, but I know some people were not very happy that they skipped Henry Pym and they went straight to Scott Lang in the movie. I think if they wanted to do a Henry Pym origin story, this would have worked really well because this is unlike really any superhero origin story that I've seen in film. This would have been very different from anything we had seen in a superhero movie, and they could have fleshed it out a little bit. But unfortunately, they didn't go in that direction. And like I said, I like the Ant-Man movie, so it's not a big problem for me. But if you didn't like the Ant-Man movie and you're looking for what you think would be a better Ant-Man story, I would recommend checking out Ant-Man Season 1. I really enjoyed it. I think that it's a very good story, very solid, and it's a good entry point into the Marvel Universe if you aren't very familiar with Marvel superheroes in the comics. So that's about all that I have to say about this book. I hope that you guys liked this video, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back tomorrow with a different video. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.